Welcome back to the Senior Power Community Channel. Today we're talking about something anyone who's used AI long enough has felt, but perhaps never vocalized. And that is, what do you do when the only AI you've got is kind of dumb? This episode is called Stuck with a Mini: How to Get Real Value from Tiny AI Models. I'm talking about the mini models, the small, fast, cheap versions of AI that get built into products, internal tools, and prototypes. They're great, so they say, for speed and cost, but they can also feel painfully shallow, especially when you're working on something nuanced, emotional, or of high stakes. You ask for a thoughtful explanation, and you get a word salad. You ask for a thumbnail that captures panic at 9 p.m. in a hospital, and guess what? You get something that looks like a generic stock photo. You ask for working code, and you get something that compiles in some alternate universe. In this episode, I want to walk through how to live with a mini, how to understand what its actual good is and what it is good at, where it's going to fall on its face, how to structure your prompts so you get the best out of it, and then how to stay safe, especially if you're anywhere near healthcare or other high-stake decisions. I'll even occasionally use my own work as an example, including a tool called Care Compass that sits in the rehab and skilled nursing world. But this episode is really for anyone who's stuck with a mini model in their app or workflow and needs to make the best of it. Let me just pause the story for a second and back up and explain what a GPT actually is in normal human language. Technically, GPTs are custom versions of ChatGPT. You give them detailed instructions, how they should behave, optional knowledge, files, including PDFs, guidelines, and you choose which skills they get things like web browsing or data analysis. Under the hood, it's still the same AI model, but instead of being a general answer anything bot, it's locked into a very narrow role. So Care Compass, for example, is really ChatGPT plus a very opinionated set of instructions plus guardrails plus a workflow designed specifically for short-term rehab and skilled nursing facility selection. To begin with, I told them things like, you never give medical advice, you never give legal or insurance advice. You focus only on helping people do the evaluation and to plan questions for these facilities. You avoid sensitive identifiers like Social Security numbers or Medicare IDs. You always remind people to confirm decisions with their clinical team and to get facility promises in writing. So when someone talks to Care Compass, it doesn't behave like a random chatbot. It behaves like a checklist-driven advisor whose entire personality is calm, senior-friendly, blunt about red flags, and very clear about what its limits are. Under the hood, the Mini is the same type of thing as the big fancy models, but it has, to put it in perspective, fewer brain cells. It has a shorter attention span and a much smaller mental whiteboard. Organizations use minis because they're cheaper per call. They respond quickly and they scale better when you have lots of users. That is absolutely, totally rational. Problem arises when we forget we're talking to a mini. We ask it to behave like a senior strategist or a specialist or a seasoned engineer, and what we actually have is closer to a fast, well-meaning, but easily confused intern. If you give that intern a very specific, well-bounded task, they can be great. If you ask them to redesign the company's strategy from Friday, you're going to suffer. Minis are the same way. So the rest of this episode is basically about how to give that intern the right job, how to check their work, and how to stop expecting them to do things they're not built for. Why does this thing, or mini, feel so bad? Let me start with a scene you might recognize, which I've experienced. You're working on something that actually matters, perhaps a tool for caregivers, maybe an internal app for your company. Maybe you're just trying to ship a feature under a deadline. You fire up the AI and you say, hey, I need a thumbnail that shows a daughter in a hospital hallway at night, phone in her hand, exhausted, trying to pick a rehab facility for her mom by tomorrow. It should feel tense, but not hopeless. And what happens? The mini model gives you a cheerful hallway, a vaguely concerned person, and absolutely none, zero, nada of the emotional reality you described. Or you say, write me a really tight intro for my podcast. My audience is caregivers under pressure, and I need to speak to that 9 p.m. panic moment. And you get something that reads like a corporate brochure. If that sounds familiar, you are not crazy. Now let's address where minis do shine. Before we tear them apart, in the latter part of this episode, let's give mini models their credit. There are things that they generally are good at. Mini models shine when the task is short, well structured, and doesn't require any type of deep judgment. Think of things like rewriting a sentence in a different tone, turning a paragraph into bullet points, converting a blob of text into a simple table, summarizing a short email thread, pulling out keywords or categories from a single message. Frankly, in those sessions, the mini is basically saying, hey, cool, you gave me a clear lane. I can run in that lane. Where it starts falling apart is when we mix high emotion, complex domain knowledge, and big fuzzy instructions. If you say, help a terrified caregiver make sense of rehab options and give them compassionate, nuanced guidance, a mini is going, to miss a lot. If you say instead, let's run this together. Take the text and we write it at a 7th grade reading level, or turn the checklist into 3 bullet points I can read over the phone. Now the mini can actually be useful. So the companion you hear over and over is shrink the task, 1, tighten the lane, 2, lower the stakes. That's how you get reasonable value out of a small model. Some of you may have noticed this. I certainly have. And it is frustrating because you invest a lot of time and get screwed up. So why does your AI development portion of the mini keep breaking stuff? Let's talk about code, because this is where a lot of people get burned. Yes, burned. You've probably seen the marketing. AI pair programmer. Just tell it what you want and it'll write the code for you. Everything works just fine. And then you try that with a mini model and it calls functions that don't exist, uses APIs that sound real but aren't, gives you code that maybe compiles but never will work. This is the truth. Here's why that happens. The model has limited context. Minis can't hold a big code base in their working memory. They're fine for a small function or a tiny snippet. But understand these 10 files and do a consistent refactor is a way beyond their comfort zone. Second, weaker understanding of libraries and frameworks. They're more likely actually to hallucinate method names, get arguments wrong, or mash up 2 different libraries by accident. Man, I've seen this. You'll see things like using a function from version 1 of a library with syntax from version 3, or calling methods that have never ever existed in any version. Thirdly, they're very confident and at the same time very wrong. A mini will happily, literally, output broken code in a very authoritative tone. It doesn't say, hey, I'm not totally sure this API is real. Fourth, they struggle with multi-step debugging. They can often explain an error message in isolation, but if the real problem is overall architectural, spanning multiple files, they get lost. So what do we do now? So what do we do with all that? We change what we ask of the model. Instead of write the whole feature, we say things like, here's a function I wrote. Can you explain what it does line by line? Write 3 unit tests for this function. Show me a minimal example of parsing a JSON into an object in any language you want to choose. And we treat anything it generates as a draft, not a solution. And certainly, the higher the stakes in your code base, the smaller the task you should give to a mini. And that same idea applies to everything outside of the code, too. All right, let's get practical here. I'll take a few minutes and give you 7 concrete rules for working with mini models so you can actually get value instead of junk and frustration. You can think of this as how to manage your slightly clueless but eager AI intern. The first tool, shrink the ask. Rule number one is don't ask a mini to be creative, empathetic, strategic, and technically perfect in one giant prompt. Break big fuzzy tasks into small boring ones. Instead of write a nuanced, emotional intro for my podcast, ask about caregivers under pressure. Try rewrite this paragraph so it sounds calmer and more grounded at a seventh grade reading level. Instead of design the whole structure of this tool for rehab decision making, try turn this mess of notes into a checklist with 3 sections: must-haves, nice-to-haves, and deal breakers. Minis do much better when each prompt is a single, clear, modest request. Second rule, over-specify context. Rule number 2 involves over-specificity. Big models can sometimes fill in the blanks and guess what you mean. Minis are much worse at that. So tell them who the audience is, what situation they're in, what emotion you want, and what you absolutely don't want. Instead of write a short script about rehab decisions, you might say, write a 60-second script for a YouTube short. The speaker is talking directly to caregivers who are in a hospital at night being told they have to choose a rehab facility by tomorrow. The tone should acknowledge panic and pressure, but end with a sense of grounded calm and practical next steps. Avoid corporate jargon at all costs, and avoid sounding like a hospital advertisement. The level of detail gives a mini a fighting chance to hit the target. Rule 3. Use examples as quote-unquote training wheels. Minis respond really well to do it like this. If there's a style you like, show it. Paste a bad version and a good version, and then say, this is before, this is after. Now take this new text and do the same kind of transformation. For code, show it one example test and then say, write more tests in this manner. For copy, show it a thumbnail title that you hate and the one you love, and say, generate 5 more like this good one. You're not just telling the model what you want, you are showing it. That's especially helpful when the model is small. Fourth rule, lock it into templates. Free-form answers are where minis ramble and get generic. Templates, on the other hand, force structure, and structure is the friend of the model. For example, if you're helping someone think about rehab facilities, you might always use the same pattern: must-haves, nice-to-haves, deal breakers, pros, cons, red flags, and questions to ask. Then your prompt is, given what the user just told you, fill out this template with bullet points only. Don't add extra sections and don't write long paragraphs. For code, your template might be a short description of what this function does and example usage. 3 tests. For content, your template might be hook line, 3 supporting points, 1 sentence call to action. The more you force the mini into repeating shape, the more consistent and usable the output becomes. Rule 5. Use the mini as an editor, not just a generator. A lot of people only ask AI to create stuff from scratch. With minis, it often works better to start with your own rough draft and then say things like, make this more concise, make this more empathetic to a caregiver who's stressed and tired, point out any jargon in this paragraph, and suggest simpler alternatives. Or perhaps critique the script, what might confuse a medical listener. List 3 ways this explanation might miss the emotional reality of someone making a rehab decision under pressure. Now, the mini is helping you improve something instead of trying to conjure it up from thin air. And again, for code, explain what this function does, suggest better variable names, propose 3 test cases this code should be able to handle. You're the primary author. The mini is nothing more than a helper. Rule 6. For code draft, don't deploy. For code, draft it. Don't deploy it. Rule is very critical. Treat mini-generated code always as a draft, never as being production ready. That means keep the request small. One function, one error, one test at a time. Never paste unknown code straight into production. Cross-check the library calls and APIs in your IDE or the docs, and identify, ideally, to write tests alongside the code. The right mental model is, this is slightly overconfident junior development who needs review on everything. Use it to unblock yourself when you start staring at boilerplate, generate rough test scaffolding, or propose a plan for a refactor. But don't hand it the keys to your code base. Sorry for some of this technical jargon. And this one is made for us. Finally, rule number 7, know when to stop. There are tasks where a mini, straightforwardly, is simply the wrong tool. If the decision is clinical, legal, financial, or deeply ethical, you should not be leaning on a small model's judgment in the first place. In a healthcare context, that means the AI can help you organize questions, it can help you summarize options, it can help you prepare scripts and checklists, but it should not be telling you which surgery to choose, which medication to take, or whether a specific facility is quote-unquote safe for your loved one. Those decisions belong with clinicians, case managers, and ultimately with you and your family, not with a mini model or any model, to be straightforward. In the same way, complex code architecture decisions should be made by an experienced human developer, or, if you're going to use AI at all, a much more capable model with very, very careful review. So rule 7 is basically use minis for scaffolding and support, not for final judgment. Let's finally bring it home now. Mini models are not magic. A lot of the time, they're frustrating, they miss nuance, they hallucinate code, and they give generic answers to rather personal questions. But if you understand what they're actually built for, and you stop asking them to be something they're not, you can still get real value out of them, especially when you shrink the task, tighten the lane, use templates and examples, and always keep a human in the loop. If you've been stuck with a mini in your own work, whether it's for code, content, or anything in healthcare, for example, I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to know what worked, what failed spectacularly. What do you wish these tools did better? Before we wrap, a quick but important reminder. Everything we've talked about today is for educational and general information purposes only. Even the smartest AI model, and certainly the mini ones, are not a substitute for medical advice, legal advice, financial advice, or professional clinical judgment. If you're dealing with real rehab decisions, medical questions, or facility choices, always confirm plans with your hospital team, your clinicians, and your case manager. And get key information and promises always in writing from any facility or provider. If you believe you or someone you're caring for may be experiencing a medical emergency, call your local emergency number immediately. Do not delay seeking in-person evaluation because of something you heard on this podcast or saw in any AI tool. Thank you for listening. If this episode helped you think differently about AI, or you know a builder or caregiver who's wrestling with these tools, please follow or subscribe, leaving a rating or review, and share it with someone who might benefit.